Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Consumer Voices panel, which for me is the most important panel, and it's the last panel, but I think it's by no means the least important. I want to just say now I've had a fantastic conference. It's been great to be around people in person. The first conference I've been in person for about 16 months. Otherwise I've been on Zoom, so it means it's the first conference I've actually had to wear trousers at. Also, I've been watching some of the conference on my laptop because I've been doing some work in my room, and I have to say the production value has definitely been better than GB News. So I'm a consumer advocate. My name is Mark Oates. I'm a vapor, I'm a snus user, I'm a nicotine pouch user, and I really think consumers are important. And with me, helping me, is Miss Suli Castro.
Hi everyone, I'm Suli Castro. I work with the conference team, and I've been working in this exciting and challenging field for the past 10 years, during which I had the pleasure to meet and work and learn from harm reduction advocates around the world, many of you present here today, some hopefully watching online, but I would like to commend you all for the great work you've been doing all those years.
Thank you. One thing that came up in a talk earlier was how important personal stories are, and I think we really need to, as consumer advocates, is remember to encourage consumers to get across to politicians that everyone has a story to tell. It's not always about regulation or doing things in a maybe sophisticated manner, but reminding people that a lot of people have gone from smoking 20, 40 cigarettes a day. Some have been trying to quit and never managed it, and vaping or another harm reduction product has managed to make them achieve it. Others haven't even been able to quit, haven't even been trying to quit, and they've just stumbled across a product which they actually enjoy more. My journey for harm reduction actually started when I was a 6-year-old boy in the school holidays. I remember being at my mum's place of work, and my job was to put condoms into brown envelopes. My mum was a sexual health nurse in the NHS. They told me they were adult sweets. And then that developed to a situation where I was using snus that I found in Sweden. I thought it was ridiculous that snus was illegal, and so I started a campaign to legalize snus. I've also got a military career, and in that military career, what we often say is that it's orders, discipline, and equipment that get soldiers onto the battlefield. When they're there, they're not fighting necessarily because they've been ordered to, but because they want to protect the men around them and make sure they don't die, the people they've trained with. I think there's an analogy there with harm reduction, because often we're brought into the subject because we believe in the science, but actually the real front and center point is the fact that we've actually got a challenge to try and save other people around us lives. And that goes for the United Kingdom, but across the world, with 7 to 8 million people dying a year. Now, I'd like to bring in some of our wonderful consumer advocates that are here with us today. And so I'd like to start with Julie Wozner. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
So Julie is the president of INCO's governing board, and she's National Policy Director on the board of the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives. So,
actually, I need to correct that. I was at the time that we signed up, but I am a part of the secretariat of INCO, and I am the treasurer for the U.S. consumer group, CASA. Sorry.
No problem, Julie. Julie, America seems to be at the forefront of consumer advocacy in many ways. You've got some of the biggest trouble when it comes to things like flavor bans, but at the same time, I see all over the internet incredibly passionate consumers. Could you just tell us a bit about that and what the challenges and opportunities are for tobacco harm reduction advocates in the United States?
Well, the challenge in the U.S. in particular is it has become an incredibly politicized issue. The challenge also is that during times of COVID, we haven't been able to assemble in groups, to hold rallies, to, really get together and make a significant impact in person. But the good news is we've got a lot of advocates. In fact, in the U.S., the consumer group, Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association, has more than 250,000 members. And those members are encouraged to contact their legislators. And in fact, that's a big part of what CASA does, is put people in touch with the people who are voting for the legislators and making the decisions. So it's a huge challenge.
And over the last few years, do you think consumer advocates have had a positive impact? Do you think politicians are listening to what they have to say?
Oh, absolutely. For example, then President Trump had announced that he was going to basically ban flavors, and then consumers got together and had a big rally in DC and, talked about how we vape and we vote, which has been a huge message in the US. And Trump backed down from that. And I really firmly believe that it was a desire not to upset people who were actively engaged in the voting process.
You just had an election that was quite divisive, but were vapers sitting on either side of the fence? Were they voting in numbers based on vaping, do you think?
I think traditionally this has been a vote-moving issue for a lot of passionate vapers. This last election, I think it was a complicated one, and I think that we all, to a man, made our voices heard, but I don't know that necessarily the votes were there in the same fashion. And I think part of that is because, again, with the politicized issue, when the party that you see as kind of supporting your rights starts to cave, then there's less reason to vote for them.
So neither party really got to grips with making sure they were the party for vapers. Is that correct?
They didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Julie, I've heard you speak very eloquently about the subject of addiction and dependence. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I don't know how eloquent I am, but the idea is it's not really useful or helpful to talk about addiction when we're referring to the use of relatively low-risk products like vapor products, snus, and the like. And I'll collectively refer to those as tobacco harm reduction or THR products. When we talk about addiction, we're typically thinking of a situation where there's significant damage and very real harm, something that really isn't an issue in connection with the use of THR products. So it's perhaps more useful to think of this as a dependence issue when we talk about THR products, recognizing that for some people, they may be nicotine dependent, but that dependence doesn't cause any significant problems, if any. And in fact, I'd like to also kind of add that when we talk about people being addicted to THR products or the epidemic of youth addiction, it's not only not particularly helpful, it actually minimizes and even trivializes the terrible damage and destruction caused by legitimate addiction issues such as a serious drug addiction, which might cause a person to lose their job, lose their health, lose their family, lose their friends, and possibly even their life, not to mention the terrible toll that all takes on the people who love and care about the person who's suffering from the addiction. But even in the context of addiction, okay, so this is where I get passionate. Even in the context of addiction, where we're talking about serious and harmful, for example, drug addictions, professionals largely embrace harm reduction as a legitimate tool and recognize the critical importance of meeting people where they are, not necessarily where you want them to be. So.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Julie. I'm just going to move on to Peter Stigaard from Denmark, who is the treasurer for the Danish Vaping Association. Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Peter, if Britain is the poster boy for good progressive harm reduction policies, then Denmark in Europe seems to be the total opposite. What on earth's going on?
Well, it seems like the Danish politicians have a set mind that tobacco harm reduction is not going to be a viable way to end smoking or reduce smoking in Denmark. Tobacco harm reduction hasn't caught on in Denmark at all, mainly because the politicians don't know or understand what tobacco harm reduction is. The alphabet group or the body part organizations, call them whatever they are quite powerful in telling the politicians what to believe. So tobacco harm reduction has no way in Denmark, unfortunately. So we face a lot of challenges, mainly with our politicians, to get them to understand what tobacco harm reduction is all about. It's about giving people the ability to choose a different way out of smoking than the ways that are being promoted, like Cyban, Champix, or Chantix, or going to sessions with a psychologist to end smoking. And mainly the media in Denmark supports the government or the politicians stand on this, and they give a lot of media time to the politicians that are against tobacco harm reduction, and to the scientists and professors that are also actively against tobacco harm reduction. And I'm sad to say that many smokers and also vapers are lacking behind at the moment. When we're talking about tobacco harm reduction, most of the people are being brainwashed to think that tobacco harm reduction or vaping or snus is actually just as addictive or just as harmful as smoking is, or even worse. So we face a battle with the media in Denmark, or maybe on a global scale, that the media are not supporting science and sensibility.
Thanks, Peter. Can you just run down some of the regulations they want to bring into Denmark and the regulations that you're fighting?
They have actually already brought them in. From the 1st of April this year, they've introduced a flavor ban. So only tobacco and menthol flavor are going to be allowed from 1st of April next year. They've said that the manufacturers can produce and make stock of flavors other than tobacco and menthol until the 1st of April this year. And then when that stock has been used, they can only sell tobacco and menthol flavorings. Cross-border sales are going to be almost impossible. There's going to be another tax on e-liquids with nicotine. So any liquids from 1 milligram per milliliter up to 12 milligram per liter is going to be excess fined with a fine of about 80%. And from 12 milligram and up to 20 milligram is going to be fined about 120%. So it's almost just as what do you call it? It's the same price whether you smoke or you vape. There's no incentive in switching from smoking to vaping because it's just as expensive.
Sure. And so what do you think the unintended consequences for the consumer are of these incredibly strict regulations?
There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences of these bans in Denmark or restrictions. Mainly the consumers are going to be the losers in this game. The people smoking in Denmark are not going to be introduced for tobacco harm reduction in their everyday life. Most of them don't even know that vaping or snus or other alternatives exist. And if you say that there's going to be a flavor ban, and the vapers who are already vaping are going to find all the loopholes they can find, they're going to use aromas or flavors they can get their hand off, and these aromas might not be suitable for vaping. So in fact, they're going to damage their health maybe by vaping something that could be just as damaging as what we saw in USA with the Avali. If you take the aromas that are made on lipids or on an oil basis, these are not supposed to be vaped or inhaled at all. So it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you introduce bans or restricted legislation, the consumers are going to find loopholes and trying to find ways to get what they need and what they find successful. So we might see a lot of people getting sick in the future in Denmark because they cannot get the products they were used to. This is a loss of control, a total control of loss for the legislators or the government in Denmark. They could have had a legislation that was built on effectiveness, quality and safety, where they controlled what products could actually be sold to the consumers in Denmark. Instead, they're going to restrict all the products that work for people and actually get them to stop smoking. So they're going to control them. ban and regulate all the ingredients that smokers find effective or vapers find effective. So we might see EVALI 2 in Denmark within half a year or a year.
Sure. And do you think that Denmark and the policies you're introducing, do you think they could cascade across the EU? Do you think the EU Commission could start introducing them? Is this the future?
I hope not, but I'm also I'm quite a realist that Denmark is a perfect country to try things out, because we have a size of about 6 million people, and there are just about 1 million smokers in Denmark. And if you want to introduce legislation, you can actually use Denmark as a test tube. You can try and see what actually happens. How do the consumers react? Is there an uprise from smokers or vapers in Denmark? And how can we combat this? If there's no uproar or upheaval about this flavor ban, then it is going to be introduced in the TPD3 that is coming this year or next year. And also the taxes and the more expensive liquids. If the Danish consumers don't revolt and say that we don't want this excess tax on our products, then it's going to be a leeway into the European consumers or the European Commission to say that, well, the Danish smokers and vapers didn't react to a higher tax, so we can actually introduce this on an EU level without any resistance.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. I'm now going to move on to Jagannath Sarangapani. Hi, the nickname Jaggy, is that correct, Jaggy?
Yeah, Jaggy is good, yeah.
Brilliant, I'll call you that. Jaggy, you're in India, and you've recently banned vaping. What are consumers doing about that? Are there many consumers in India? Forgive me, I'm not that well briefed on India.
Yeah, we have a significant vaping community. Yes, definitely the ban has slowed down the conversion of smokers to vaping, but it hasn't stopped. It's definitely happening. Access to good quality products is a question mark, but people always find their way around these loopholes. Bans have never worked. Everyone knows that around the world. And yet we have it. And so we have channels that have been created. And it's business as usual, except the problem is that these are unregulated right now. Previously, while there wasn't regulation, vendors were having self-regulation. They were not selling substandard products. They were not selling to minors. They had a code of conduct which they were implementing. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist when you have a black market and when you have a gray market. And so that's the kind of problem that we have with a ban on our products. Government has tried to make it a little tougher for existing vapers because personal consumption is not banned. And so they've tried to make it difficult by implementing, carrying it or when you travel by air and so on. But then we still find ways around it. So we have a vaping community and we find ways to circumvent such situations. So that's where we are right now.
Sure, Jaggy. I'm running a campaign to legalise snus in the UK. I'm hoping that will be achieved. There's all over the world people are campaigning to legalise cannabis, and that's been legalised. I mean, is there a campaign started to try and open up the sale of e-cigarettes in India?
Well, we have been talking and we have been trying to educate and sensitize the political powers that are there, because one thing that the debate in the parliament when the talk on the e-cigarette did come about was the abject ignorance on the subject matter. 3/4 of the parliamentarians who spoke about it did not know what an e-cigarette was, let alone what a vape was or an e-liquid was. And the kind of conjectures that they were coming up was downright amazing and had no bindings with reality. And so we have been trying to educate them, sensitize them. We have been sending letters of representations, getting them up to speed on what it is. But then we have a second problem wherein ban on research of THR products also exists. That's a government diktat, wherein government-sponsored universities will not be allowed to enter into research in THR products. which is actually a catch-22 situation, because one of the things that the government used as an excuse when they promulgated such a ban was that there wasn't enough scientific data to support e-cigarettes and vaping. And yet, on the other hand, they've gone ahead and done this. And so you have to go through a complicated process. You have only private universities and bodies that can do research. And so they've tried to stent it. But then we are still fighting this battle. And we will prevail. We are confident of that. Absolutely.
Sure, I'll just take this moment to say that if anyone's got any questions, we're really keen in this session to as many questions as possible. So online and in the audience, please think of those questions. Just Jaggi, quickly, the World Health Organization, they issued some kind of award and they were tweeting about India. I mean, is India the lapdog of the WHO?
Well, see, reality, okay. Vapors in India constitute 0.02% of the total tobacco consumers. And that's the product they've banned. Now, smokers, if you take tobacco smokers, cigarette smokers are 1 for every 10 BD smokers. That is the more dangerous one. They are unfiltered. They're considered a cottage industry and they are protected. Protected so much so that there was a proposed legislation to have pictorial warnings on these products. That was taken apart. That was not done. What did the Minister of Health do? Legislates a ban. He does not have pictorial warnings on BDs. Third, we have not increased taxes for 3 years on tobacco products, which is what they say is the suited goal to drive this, because that's the only thing. Now, this is what it is. This is all just tokenism. This is done just for awards. He's won that award. So he pats himself on the back, but beyond that, it's done nothing at all, really. And ground reality, there has been absolutely no effect when it comes to tobacco harm reduction, tobacco control. We still have 1 million people who die every year in India because of smoking-related illnesses. If you take chewing tobacco, which is an even more dangerous thing, we have another 300,000 people dying from that as well. And so the magnitude of the problem is massive. And to do these kinds of things and to say you've done a great job for focusing on one tiny little 0.02% hardly counts as any effort in tobacco control or any effort in this thing. That's our opinion here.
Sure, you picked up on oral tobacco. We actually have that issue in the UK with the Southeast Asian community, and potentially pasteurised Swedish snus could be an opportunity. Is that all used in India, or could it be an option?
Now, snus, there are some people who have started putting that in the market in India, because that has not been banned as yet. There is an option which is opening itself up, and we do believe that that's a good, tobacco harm reduction. In fact, that is the thing that we are actually talking, because we can't, people who want to quit have no access to vapes now. So we can point them, we can talk about them, but we cannot go and give them away. They don't know where to buy it from. So first-time users. So under such a circumstance, switching to snus or even nicotine pouches, if not even the pasteurized tobacco pouches, even pure nicotine pouches are also being available. They are being promoted, and that does have a good chance of coming up on top, unless, of course, the government suddenly wakes up and figures that some other industry segment is going to get affected, and therefore let's clamp down on it. Because that seems to be the only approach out here. But that being said, that does have a lot of scope, because India chewing tobacco is a huge problem.
Okay, thanks so much, Jaggi. Do we have any questions from the audience? And if not, maybe Sweli can provide us one from online.
Yes, we do have a few from online. Thank you very much. The people online that are asking questions. We have, there is probably to any of you that would like to answer this one. We hear a lot of words referenced referring to making tobacco harm reduction products restricted to people wanting to quit, do you think that stories of accidental quitting or quitters are important and should be promoted as well, not just people that are set on quitting? Anybody
Yes.
want to come in, Julie?
Yeah, I do. I was an
Okay,
accident.
thank you.
So, yeah, when I picked up an e-cigarette, I had no intention of quitting. This was back in 2008 that I ordered my first e-cigarette, and it arrived in January of 2009. I wasn't trying to quit. I just thought I might cut back from my 2.5 pack a day habit and maybe get down to, I don't know, 2 packs a day. You know, I wasn't trying to quit. And within 2 weeks, I was done smoking. You know, it's just a very stupid idea to limit these products only to people who are smoking. You know, at every single point, every smoker out there was a non-smoker. There was some point before they ever started smoking. And so what you're basically saying is if somebody wants to initiate nicotine use, they need to do so with the most dangerous products before they have access to the low-risk products. And so when you think about it that way, it sounds really stupid. So yes, we should be talking about the accidental quitters, the places right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just about you know, smokers switching to vaping. I've had friends who have been users of chewing tobacco who have actually found it very convenient to quit with a vape rather than any other form. So that kind of cross transitions do happen, because what are all these things about eventually? It's about your nicotine, right? You want your nicotine. You want that little fix of nicotine. And so the route is a much safer route. And so I don't see why it should have any link to do with, if you are a smoker, then you're allowed to, you know, switch to a vape, which is low harm, because anything, in any way, it is low harm.
Thank you, Jagi. Peter?
Yeah, I was convinced that I was going to be the last smoker in Denmark because I was not going to smoke. I really enjoyed smoking as much as I enjoy vaping. I read a tweet that Louise Ross sent out the other day that I have it here actually, one of my newest, youngest, least experienced colleagues spotted immediately that countries that raise taxes on vaping are giving an advantage to smoking. If he could spot that, why can't health ministers? I'm still amazed that the legislators or the governments don't see the point of THR. They really can't fathom that if they're going to ban something, they shouldn't ban the least dangerous product, but the most dangerous products instead. All these restrictions make consumers look for loopholes, as Jackie also said. We're going to see everything going underground or going to the black market instead of being controlled by a sensible regulation. So, but I also quit.
Yeah.
Good for you. Thank you.
I'll just add to that, my personal experience as well. I was living in China and smoking 50p pack cigarettes, and I had no interest in the fact that it could shorten my life. I didn't care. And in the military, it's the same. You know, you go speak to a soldier and you say, well, have you thought about doing something safer? Do they care? No. Why would you? You know. And so the opportunity to quit by accident because a product's actually nicer is brilliant.
We have got a few questions online, so if you get this one.
One's come in from my hero, Bengt Weberg, from Sting Free Snus. The ETHRA survey, and if you haven't seen the ETHRA survey, it's absolutely brilliant. 35,000 EU and UK respondents. They said 31% of EU smokers would like to try snus if it became legalized. So Ben wants to know, do you think there's any chance of ending the sale of snus? And Peter, I think you're a great guy to go for that.
We actually have, it's not called snus, it's called cut tobacco in Denmark, but snus is also banned in Denmark. We can buy a product that is actually quite similar to it. And the most people who use that type of chewing pouches or whatever you call them are actually quite young male. And why is that? Because they banned smoking in all schools and high schools. So they had to get their nicotine fixed some way. So every young adult male from the age of 12 up to 18, instead of smoking, they started chewing these tobacco pouches instead. And that created quite an uproar. So right now, I don't think there's much. There's not a success for snus in Denmark right now.
Yeah. Well, my plan is we've just had a review announced by Joe Churchill, the health minister in the UK, into the UK's position on snus, and then we will legalise it and we will show the European Union what they're missing out on. So,
brilliant.
Fingers crossed. And Charles Gardner, a well-known name to us all, he's come in with a question for Julie. Julie, how can safe and nicotine advocates keep going in the face of massive anti-vaping propaganda? How do you keep going?
We have no choice. You know, if this were just about us as individual people being able to access our products, everybody here would be able to get what they need in the face of an all-out ban. I mean, we all would be able to get what we need. What we're fighting for isn't just us, we're fighting for the next generation. And, you know, if you are like me and the others sitting on this panel, and you feel that vapor products or snus or some other THR product literally saved your life. I mean, I really feel that these have saved my life. And if they didn't save my life, they immeasurably improved the quality of it. You just don't have a choice. You know, this is a righteous battle. And we just need to keep talking to people. I think where we can get energized is by sharing our stories with other people, talking about it with just people we don't know very well, introducing them to the idea. But we don't have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. So many lives at stake. Charles Hampshire Thomas, his question has now disappeared as soon as I say his name.
We have a question from the floor as well.
Okay, yeah, so any questions from the floor?
Yes, he's just...
Brilliant.
Hi guys, I'm Matt from 2Vapor, and I've just got a quick question. So far throughout the conference, there has been a constant conversation of those who switch from traditional combustible cigarettes to alternatives. However, many people my age don't start with cigarettes, they start with vaping. What are your thoughts on this?
Good question. Anyone like to come in on that?
Well, okay, perhaps I'll go. Now, when you look at a curiosity of a teen per se, okay, if that's your age group, I'm sorry, I don't know how old you are, but that being said, now, teens are going to try anything in any case. My son, he was caught smoking when he went out for a football tournament, and then the principal caught me and gave him a shelling down and things like that. So that's going to happen. Of course, that's going to happen. And you got to understand and recognize that problem that exists. Now, no one condones it. Of course, you got to get put down if that's the thing, because it's not meant for anyone who's underage. Yet, you are going to have that small element of people who are going to try, because they're going to try it in any case. But the question that needs to be asked is, if the kid is going to try it, wouldn't you rather he try something which is a little safer? I think that's a bigger question that really needs to be answered. I'm not saying that it's perfectly fine, but my only thing is, if you are going to try it, why don't you try something safer? Perhaps you've got to look at it that way.
You know, I'd like to chime in and say I agree 100%. I raised 2 daughters. And, you know, we look at things, if you're smart, you look at them as a practical matter. And I told my girls, I really don't want you to drink. Yeah, I just don't want you to drink before you're of legal age. However, if you are going to drink, then don't drink and drive. Call me, I'll come get you. I don't want you to be having sex before you're ready to handle the physical and emotional consequences. But if you're going to do it, then, you know, use protection. You know, we have these very difficult, real conversations with our children. And I guess it's the same with nicotine use. I'd rather you not. I really would. But if you're going to choose to try nicotine, for God's sake, why would you pick up the really terribly dangerous stuff? Pick up something low risk.
Okay, anyone more from the audience? Judy?
Hi, my name's Judy Gibson, and I work with INCO. I'd just be interested what the panel feels about the statement that has been made pretty much universally from the tobacco control, that there is no real evidence that e-cigarettes actually helps people to quit, which is patently ridiculous. But how do we, and it's not an easy question, but how on earth do we change this around? Because we need to change the narrative. Thank you.
Thanks. Peter, would you like to come in on that?
If you quit, or if you keep on saying that e-cigarettes are not an effective motive for stopping smoking, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And all the thousands of smokers in Denmark that actually stopped smoking are just anecdotes. There's no evidence that a lot of Danish smokers have actually stopped smoking. But even though I see fewer and fewer smokers, none of my friends are smokers anymore, maybe two on occasion. Just 5 years ago, I could count 10 or 20 smokers amongst my friends. So you're actually going to see the evidence right in front of you in everyday life that fewer and fewer people are smoking. And how do they stop smoking then? Are they just going to take the pill, or are they going to chew nicotine gum, or are they going to take a cold turkey? No, they are probably vaping as long as and are not smoking anymore. Most of them are. Many of them are actually convinced to start vaping instead of smoking. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would perhaps say that see, each and every one of us who is in advocacy here, consumer advocacy, vaping advocacy and THR and so on, we've all been those success stories. Now we have quit, we believe in it, and therefore we are trying to send that message across because it has been our personal journey, and there couldn't be someone who better represents a personal success when you're putting forward a message that, vaping does save lives, and it is definitely safer and healthier. And I think as more and more of us actually come together, including on such platforms, and talk about it, the message is going to get across. Sure, you will have resistance. You're going to say, what's this? I mean, there are people who have, I've been vaping now for 6+ years. I've never been healthier in my life. There are people who have smoked vape 10+ years. We have this, and you have that, and eventually that's what's going to come forward, and that's the proof that will prevail. You can't hide it forever. That's the point.
Sure. Jaggy, I've got two questions here that I think particularly relate to India. One's from Charles Gardner, who asks, can nicotine vapes hit a price point in India that will help smokers quit?
Absolutely. You see, now vaping in India had just kind of started getting popular. We had spent about 3-something years in it, and by that time, unfortunately, we had the ban, and so things got frittered away. But then that did encourage a lot of local manufacturers to start coming in and started making e-liquids more suited to an Indian palate, and then so on and so forth. We did try to make some efforts, especially for the lower income category. We did try to make specific flavors which would, work with BDs to help that income group also quit. Dr. Shri also touched upon it a little. Now, these kind of things exist. Now, we have a huge population out here. Now, with or without government support, we are quite confident. In fact, there are some devices that can be made, pod-type systems that can actually be used to help people quit. We are not talking about the major cigarette user, because that's a very tiny little segment. The huge problems are down there, in the lower income line, and that's the target audience. And there are solutions that are possible that can address them very, very effectively. It needs legislation, and I'm quite confident that with innovation, we can crack the code.
Okay, we haven't got long left, but one thing I just want to finish on. The World Health Organization, vapers have known that the World Health Organization has been pretty useless, always trying to control our lives and not focusing on the things that are important. We've all known that, but the world is now waking up to that. They're seeing that with COVID and how badly that's been managed. Only a few days ago, there's a draft paper that suggests that women of childbearing age should be prevented from drinking. It's a good job my mother's not of childbearing age, because I think she'd punch someone at the WHO. Julie, COP9 coming up, it's very important, but are American vapers as active and interested in taking part and being involved in COP9 as they are about their domestic policies?
In the US, perhaps not as much, but that's going to be a challenge that CASA will be facing this year, trying to get people engaged. But as you know, the US isn't really a signatory to the FCTC. So our situation is a little bit different, but what happens there does impact in the US. It impacts everywhere. In fact, that's why, CASA is actually involved with INCO. We recognize that this is a global issue, and everybody needs to come together. But it is going to be a challenge.
Sure. Well, I know I'm going to be pushing the British government to try and stand up for vaping at COP9. Sorry we left the EU, Peter, so we can't help steer that ship. But do you think the EU are going to be helping Britain on their side, or are they going to be pushing for more regulation at COP9, Peter?
Unfortunately, I think they're going to be pushing for strict regulation and bans on flavours as well, and a tax hike as well.
Okay. And do you think Danish vapers are going to be pushing their government to, well, it doesn't sound like there's much hope with the Danish government, to be honest, or the EU government. Have you thought about leaving the European Union, getting a new government?
Several times, yeah. And the government in Denmark, we have a multi-party level system in the government, or in the politician era. Even though if it's left or right-wing government sitting in the government, it makes no change. They're all against vaping, so it makes no change.
Brilliant. Well, you're very welcome out with us, okay? Thank you very much.
We have actually talked about leaving the EU for a lot of times, and we have had votes in Denmark, I think about 2 or 3 times now, and every time we've said remain.
I'm coming over, I'm going to get my soapbox out, I'm going to start telling the Danish people to join us. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaggy, thank you, Judy, thank you, Peter. Really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, just want to say sorry, Roberto couldn't join us because he had a power failure. It's a shame, but please bear with us. Our amazing commentary team is here and they're going to get ready to go on the stage with Paddy Costa when they're going to wrap up the session. Thank you so much for sticking to us. I know we are between you and the bar, so we really appreciate for you staying and watching this session, and our team is going to come and wrap up the session. So thank you very much.